Hey guys, tonight we're going to slip quietly into the early morning of a Victorian home. Not the kind you tour at a museum, all polished wood and velvet ropes, but the real kind. You're waking up in your narrow, cold room lit by watery grey light. There's a frost on the inside of the window pane, and you can hear the maid lighting fires downstairs. But before you even think of joining her, there's one thing that needs doing. You have to get dressed, and that means the corset. Now, you've worn this corset so often, it feels like a second skeleton. It doesn't just hug your waist, it reigns in your entire ribcage. Your breath moves differently, your shoulders pull back, your hips tilt slightly forward. This isn't a decorative accessory, it's the backbone of your silhouette, your posture, your entire presentation to the world. And tightening it is a process. You stand still as your sister, or your maid if you're lucky, starts at the bottom and works her way up, tugging the laces in firm little jerks. There's a rhythm to it, and a silence too. You try not to wince. No one talks during lacing. But here's something you didn't expect. The corset isn't just about looking dainty, it's about discipline, not just of the body, but of behaviour. Once you're cinched in, you move differently. You don't slouch. You can't. You walk straighter, slower. You eat less too, not because you want to, but because there's nowhere for the food to go. That's why many women develop the delicate habit of nibbling rather than chewing. Meals become an affair of tiny bites and gentle sips, not because of etiquette alone, but because a tight corset makes indigestion nearly inevitable. It's not all rigidity, though. Some corsets are surprisingly flexible, made with cording or even elastic panels, if you can afford such newfangled things. Others are strictly whalebone and steel, and yes, there's even a type called the health corset, advertised as a more humane alternative, though it still pinches in places you'd rather not mention. You think back to your aunt, who used to brag about sleeping in her corset every night for a decade so she'd never lose her shape. You remember the stories about girls passing out in church pews, or needing smelling salts after dancing too hard, almost always because they'd pulled their stays too tight trying to look like the fashion plates in Godey's Ladies' Book. You wouldn't call it comfortable. But in its own way, the corset feels like armour. You're not truly ready to face the world until you're laced in and buttoned up. That pressure around your ribs is like a whispered reminder. Behave, stand straight, and don't take up too much space. There's an odd intimacy in the routine. The touch of hands against your back. The mirror that shows you both smaller and stronger. And sometimes, just sometimes, when no one's around, you loosen the laces ever so slightly. Not enough to be noticed, but just enough to take a full breath. And breathe you do, shallow but elegant, as you reach for your next layer. Because the corset is only the beginning. You're still not fully dressed, not by Victorian standards. The corset may be your foundation, but now you start layering upwards and downwards. First, the corset cover. A soft cotton garment meant to protect your dresses from the metal busks and stiff boning underneath. Its purpose isn't luxury. It's to make sure sweat stains don't ruin your bodice. Cleanliness is a performance, even when it's an illusion. But here's something most people forget. Corsets weren't just worn by rich women strutting down Bond Street. Servants, factory workers, and even pregnant women wore them too. Adjusted for class and circumstance. Your corset might be made of fine brocade with delicate lace trim, or it might be canvas, stained and repaired, with one broken bone that jabs your side whenever you bend. Either way it's expected. Even young girls weren't spared. Mothers would begin lacing daughters into light stays as young as 5 or 6. By 12, the real thing took over. It was a rite of passage. No corset, no womanhood. And while some medical voices of the day raised alarms, complaining of compressed lungs, displaced organs and fainting spells, the social pressure screamed louder. You wouldn't show up to church without one, would you? Let's not forget the morning routine that came before even putting it on. Before you got dressed, you washed. But not entirely. Full-body baths were rare and time-consuming. Instead, you likely performed a daily strip wash. Cold water in a basin, a flannel cloth, a moment of icy clarity. Then, onto the corset, layered under drawers, chemise and petticoats. All of this before breakfast. As you dress, you recall how corsets left marks, sometimes permanent, ridges and indentations down your back. Some women developed calluses, others developed pride. There were even corset competitions, who could cinch the smallest waist, measured by ribbons or hands wrapped fully around the middle. Victorian fashion illustrations weren't just fantasy, they were goalposts. And you? You glance at the mirror again. Your waist looks lovely, tightly curved like an hourglass. But you know better than to believe it came without cost. You've heard whispers of women having ribs surgically removed, though no one you know has truly confirmed it. Still, you wonder. Later today, you'll loosen the laces after tea if no one's watching. Maybe even take the corset off entirely before supper and wrap yourself in a loose dressing gown. But not yet. Not while the day is fresh. The windows are open, and your image matters. The corset is both cage and canvas. It holds you in place, but it also sculpts the person others expect you to be. As you fasten your outer bodice over it, smoothing down the fabric with gloved hands, you prepare yourself not just to leave your room, but to step into a world that judges first by silhouette, then by behaviour, and rarely by truth. One last tug at the waist, a glance over the shoulder, and you walk into the parlour. Upright, restrained, perfect. You lean in toward the looking glass, morning light catching the pale shimmer of your skin, or rather, what you hope appears to be your skin. Because today, your real complexion is no one's business but your own, and the little jar in your hands holds the secret. The cream inside smells faintly of lavender and something bitter underneath. You dip your fingers into its cool, chalky surface and begin smoothing it onto your face. Your fingertips already know the dance: cheeks, forehead, nose, then down the neck. You avoid the eyes, not because it's unsafe, but because it stings more there. This cream promises to make you radiant, whiter, softer, smoother. You might not know every ingredient, few do, but the results speak for themselves. A ghost-pale complexion is the hallmark of elegance. Tanned skin hints at outdoor labour. And you're no peasant. You pause at your reflection. It's working. You're not glowing, but you are fading, which is the goal. In the age before foundation, this is your armour. And like the corset, it hides more than it reveals. Now, you don't like to think too hard about what's in it, but sometimes the label says, arsenite of copper. That's arsenic, in case you didn't know. Mixed with vinegar, chalk and bismuth, it gives your skin that coveted pallor. Women speak of it as they do of weather, casually, with mild complaint but full compliance. You've even heard of soaps laced with arsenic, advertised with phrases like purifies and beautifies in women's magazines. And yet, you've also heard the murmurs: redness that won't fade, ulcers that don't heal, hair that thins around the temples. One cousin's friend had to stop using a face lotion because her skin peeled like apple flesh. But she did look angelic at the wedding. You dab on some rice powder to finish. It cuts the shine and locks everything in place. The container is beautifully etched, a gift from a friend, and inside is a puff soft as milkweed. You pat your cheeks gently. A little cloud of dust floats, then settles. Your lips remain bare. Rouge is for actresses, and only at night. Some women, usually in novels, are described as having natural beauty. But you know that even those rare creatures usually have a stash of arsenic wafers tucked in their nightstands. They come wrapped like sweets. Tiny tablets, chewed daily, meant to clear the complexion. They say it makes your eyes brighter too, like something inside is glowing out. The wafer craze is catching on among the more daring. You've only tried one. It tasted like rust and soap. But then again, so did your aunt's soup. It's strange, isn't it, that you're more afraid of freckles than you are of slow poisoning. But every woman you know would rather look pale and frail than blotchy and hale. A sickly hue, ironically, makes you look healthy. Healthy in the social sense, which is to say, rich. You close the jar, slip it into the drawer next to your gloves and hand mirror, and glance at the light again. Still soft, still gentle, you're almost ready. You reach for a little bottle on the dresser, shaped like a teardrop and stoppered with cork. Inside swirls a liquid that used to be clear, but has turned slightly yellow over time. It's lemon juice, or maybe ammonia, depending on which friend recommended it. You've been dabbing it under your eyes every night to fade shadows and discourage wrinkles. Does it work? Who knows? But not doing something feels far worse. Some women swear by elderflower water. Others swear by mercury-based ointments, though no one says so directly. They simply glow a little too brightly, and their smiles grow strangely stiff with time. There's an understanding between women. You don't ask what's in the bottle, you just ask, does it work? The face is only part of the battle. You take up a pumice stone and rub lightly at your hands and elbows. The goal is not softness alone, but to erase any trace of roughness that might suggest labour. You've seen ladies bleach their hands with lemon and milk, wear gloves to bed filled with wax and herbs, and then there's the rice powder again, dusted over the backs of hands just in case a gentleman kisses them. First impressions matter, especially when they involve skin. In private, you've caught yourself studying women with cheeks a little too pink. You suspect they use Spanish paper. Thin slips soaked in carmine that release colour when licked and rubbed across the face. It's clever. Illegal in some circles, but clever. You've tried it once. It made your lips sting and taste like dried roses and vinegar. But you did look wonderful in candlelight. The truth is, everything you use to beautify carries a hint of danger, and not just chemical. If someone catches you applying too much, you're vain. Too little, you're careless. Wear rouge and you're theatrical. Skip the powder and you're plain. There's no safe zone, only tightrope walking between judgment and expectation. You think of the girl who used belladonna drops to dilate her pupils. She said it made her eyes look more innocent, more longing. But she also started squinting in daylight and stumbled down the garden steps last spring. Some say it's worth it. You're not so sure. Then again, every woman in your circle has at least one beauty horror story. A cousin who burned her face trying a new cream. A friend who passed out from an arsenic wafer and had to be revived with smelling salts. A neighbour whose lashes never grew back after trying a copper tonic. You return to the mirror now and see someone who looks perfect, pale, poised, polished. But underneath that smooth exterior lies a mix of chalk, metal, and secrets. You blink, and for a moment, imagine yourself without any of it, bare-skinned, sun-freckled, smiling too wide. But no, that's not how the world works. With a final glance and a quiet breath, you reach for your gloves. It's time to meet the day. And everything about you, from your lace-trimmed collar to the ghostly hue of your cheekbones, says you've done the morning ritual right. Even if your skin tingles just a little too much, you smooth your hair back with deliberate care, fingers finding the familiar texture of pins and padding beneath the layers. It looks full, glossy, arranged in a coil that would impress even your mother-in-law. But here's the truth. Most of that hair isn't yours. It started subtly. A few strands lost in the comb each morning, tucked away in a little ceramic pot labelled combings. Every proper lady has one. You'd collect those strands for weeks, even months, until you had enough to sew into what's charmingly called a rat. A wad of your own discarded hair, rolled tight and pinned under your real locks to give the illusion of volume. It's not gross, it's ingenious. Eventually, though, your own hair couldn't keep up with fashion. That's when you turn to the hair dealer. Yes, that's a real person. He comes around with a case full of plaits, coils and curls, sorted by colour, priced by length, sourced from women you'll never meet. Some hair comes from peasant girls in the countryside, offered in exchange for a few coins or a ribbon. Other strands come from more unsettling places, hospitals, orphanages, even the recently deceased. But no one talks about that. The truth curls in quietly at your temples as you examine the false bun you're about to fasten. It's a perfect match. Auburn, thick, and just the right shine. You paid extra for that. You pin it on and secure it with a dozen hairpins, sharp little things that stab your scalp if you move too quickly. But now your silhouette is complete. From the front, it's an elegant twist. From the back, a gravity-defying loop. And from a distance, it all looks like nature, when in fact it's a small feat of engineering. Hair fashion is no simple matter. Styles change with the decade and the season. This year, towering pompadours and braided coronets are in. Last year it was Grecian coils. Some women go as far as attaching entire transformations. Full caps of false hair that sit atop their own. They look like wigs, but don't call them that. Wig sounds theatrical. A lady wears a piece. You've seen rivalries spark over hairpieces, accusations of fakery whispered behind fans. One woman's bun fell off during a waltz, another fainted when her fringe was tugged by a child. Humiliation doesn't come louder than visible artifice. Still, you persist. Because real hair, left to its own devices, is rarely enough. Victorian life is a performance, and your head is the stage. This morning, your maid carefully teased out your real locks with a boar bristle brush. She added a touch of lavender oil, not too much, or it will look greasy, and helped you wind everything into the base for your switch. You both worked in silence. There's a kind of ritual to it, unspoken but binding. As you tuck in the last pin and feel the slight weight at the back of your head, you straighten your shoulders. It's not just about looking lovely. It's about looking composed, contained, immaculate. Because your hair is your crown, and every strand, even the borrowed ones, carries the proof. Later in the day, you pause by the mirror and notice a single hairpin slipping out. With practiced fingers, you slide it back in place, knowing that if even one piece of your construction falls, the illusion crumbles. That's the thing about Victorian hair. It's never just hair. It's identity, discipline, and quiet competition, layered in coils and curls. You think about what's hiding inside your dresser drawer, a small box wrapped in soft cloth. Inside, a switch of real human hair, darker than your own. It belonged to your cousin before she fell ill, before her treatments began. She gifted it to you, with a smile and a joke. At least someone should get use out of it. You haven't worn it yet, but you can't bring yourself to throw it away either. Then there's the collection of combings you've been saving. Some women pay for their own hair to be made into rats and switches, sent away to a special hair worker who washes, sorts, bundles, and returns it as something grander. It's an odd feeling, waiting for your own hair to return to you in a different form. You once attended a tea where a lady claimed her braid had been stolen at a public bathhouse. Another swore she caught lice from a borrowed fringe. The room laughed nervously, but not too hard. These aren't far-fetched fears. Hair theft is real, and infestations, even more so. That's why you always air your pieces in sunlight when no one's watching, and you powder them, yes, like a wig, to keep them fresh. If you're truly cautious, You add a few drops of gin to discourage pests. You recall the hair advertisements from the Illustrated London News, bottles promising to restore fullness, eliminate dandruff, even make your curls shine like mahogany. Mrs. Allen's World Hair Restorer, Roland's Macassar Oil. You tried the latter once. It smelled like lemons and regret, and left oil stains on the back of your chair. So-called antimacassars were invented precisely to protect furniture from it. But what really stays with you is how everyone acts as though this elaborate process is effortless. You're expected to emerge from your dressing room looking serene, as if you simply woke up like this, as if your hair naturally coils like a Grecian goddess and never falls out in humid weather. Heaven forbid anyone sees the pins, the padding, the little net that holds it all in place while you sleep. Still, when you walk into a room, heads turn. People notice the shape of your profile, the line of your bun, the shine of your fringe. You're seen. And in this world, to be seen is to survive. As the day unfolds, the weight at the back of your head becomes familiar, comforting almost. A small reminder of the quiet labour beneath your elegance. You move with care, bow with poise, and when the breeze brushes a strand loose, you smile faintly and tuck it back. Not because it's untidy, but because it's yours. You bend slightly at the waist and reach beneath the folds of your skirt, not for modesty, not for mischief, but to find your pocket. No, not the little sewn-in thing on the side of your dress. That would be far too practical. Your real pocket is tied separately around your waist, hidden beneath petticoats, bustle and fabric that rustles like dry leaves in the wind. It's a strange little thing, this pocket. Made of linen, sometimes velvet if you're lucky, often embroidered with your initials or a small flower. It ties with a string, like a tiny apron worn on the inside, and it's not alone. Many women wear two, one on each hip. But reaching them? That's another story. The opening in your skirt, known politely as a pocket slit, is meant to align perfectly with the pocket beneath. That's the theory. In practice, it's like threading a needle blindfolded. You slip your hand through layers of fabric, groping in the dark, hoping your fingers don't land on a spilled pin or an unexpected orange peel. Yes, you once left one there for days. It flattened. Your fingers finally brush the edge. Inside are the quiet treasures of your day. A thimble, a folded note, 2 peppermint lozenges stuck together, a mourning brooch you don't want to wear but can't throw away. There's also a little coin purse, soft as fruit skin, containing exactly 6pence, enough for an emergency cab, or a secret cake from the bakery on Queen Street. The pocket is a contradiction, hidden yet vital, out of sight, yet always within you. No one sees it, no one asks about it. But if you were ever caught without it, you'd feel naked. It's more personal than your gloves, more intimate than your shoes. It holds things you'd never show and thoughts you'd rather keep close. And sometimes, just sometimes, it holds a letter. Folded once, then again. Pressed between fabric and flesh until the words imprint faintly on your memory. One such letter, written in pencil and sealed without a name, has lived in your pocket for 3 weeks now. You've never read it aloud, but you've memorized every line. The strangeness of this system becomes clear when you dress. You must always remember which side your slit is on, left or right, so you don't find yourself in public awkwardly digging in the wrong direction. You once heard a woman laugh so hard at her mistake that her pocket came untied and fell with a thud onto the cobblestones. Inside, a dead mouse. She was a science student, or so she said. And while the world assumes that men carry everything in their coat, you carry your world wrapped in silence between the seams. The real problem with hidden pockets isn't just accessing them. It's everything they represent. You feel the weight of yours as you walk, swinging softly against your hip like a secret you carry under lock and key. Because pockets, in this era, aren't quite yours. They're tolerated, they're temporary, and they are, quite literally, tied to you, unlike men's pockets, which are sewn into their coats, vests and trousers, plentiful and permanent. Yours exist as a removable afterthought. A woman's pocket can be stripped away as easily as her shawl, which is why they're not just practical, they're quietly radical. Your great-aunt once told you that during the Gordon riots in London, a woman smuggled gunpowder through the streets in her pocket. Another, more infamous tale involves a housemaid who carried love letters for two gentlemen at once, never found out, because both messages live side by side in the same hidden pouch. Even now, your neighbour, a widow with sharp eyes and sharper opinions, carries pamphlets stitched with the words "Votes for Women," folded neatly alongside her embroidery floss. You touch your pocket now through the layers, feeling the shape of its contents without looking. The brooch, the lozenges, the crumpled letter. There's something comforting in the soft clutter, like a miniature room stitched into your clothing, a place where your agency hides in plain sight. Sometimes, though, it betrays you. You've lost coins down there, never to be seen again. A key once slipped out during a garden party, prompting a full hour of searching among flower beds, and then there was the time your lace handkerchief poked out just far enough to be noticed by a too curious child. He tugged, thinking it was a prize. You nearly toppled over. Yet despite the flaws, you prefer this secret world. There's a dignity in its invisibility. A woman might be denied the right to vote, to own property in her own name, to walk freely without a chaperone. But she still carries what matters. Letters, needles, ink, secrets, all folded tightly into a pouch no one else sees. Some say the fashion for these tied-on pockets is fading. Dresses now are slimmer, silhouettes narrower. Seamstresses are beginning to stitch shallow external pockets instead. Useless little things that fit a calling card and nothing more. You tried one. It felt like walking with your hands tied. You glance down now, your skirts swaying as you move. No one can tell, but you're carrying more than your day's necessities. You're carrying the weight of small freedoms. And when you change for evening, you'll untie the pocket gently and place it in the drawer. Not because it's unimportant, but because it needs rest too. You'll check its contents once more, maybe read the letter just one more time, and then fold the flap closed. In the morning, you'll tie it back on just above your hip bone where it's always belonged, and step once more into the world with a secret swinging at your side. You wake earlier than usual, stomach a bit unsettled from last night's boiled cabbage, and slip out of bed with care. The room is dim and cold. You cross the wooden floor in wool socks and lift the lid of the chamber pot beneath the dressing table. It's not exactly a glamorous moment, but it's a daily one. Victorian bathrooms, as you know, aren't really bathrooms at all. For most women, even those in fairly nice homes, there's no running water upstairs, no flushing toilet, no tiled floor that glistens in the light. Just a jug, a bowl, and that ceramic pot you hope the maid remembers to empty. Now comes the real puzzle: cleaning up. You glance around for the small bundle of paper you tucked beneath the basin yesterday. It's not toilet paper. That's far too expensive and rare. What you have instead is a stack of newspaper scraps, cut into neat squares. Some are headlines, others obituaries. You try not to read them as you use them. If you're visiting someone particularly posh, you might spot a perforated roll of medicated toilet paper hanging in the water closet. The kind made by the British Perforated Paper Company. It smells faintly of disinfectant and feels a bit like stiff tissue mixed with regret. Only the wealthiest families keep it in regular supply. Everyone else makes do with whatever's at hand. In rural homes, and even in working-class parts of London, stories float about people using leaves, corn husks, or even wool scraps to tidy up. You once overheard a woman brag that she only ever used pages from a stolen French romance novel. She said the paper was soft and the dialogue dreadful. This morning, though, you have old newsprint, and with it comes another hazard. Ink. The cheap kind smears easily. You've learned the hard way not to wear white drawers on days when you're using the Times. Your cousin once emerged from the privy with half a market report transferred to her thigh. Then there's the matter of disposal. You wrap the used squares and drop them into the slop bucket. A heavy tin pail with a lid that clangs just enough to wake the dog. The maid will empty it later into the ash pit. You try not to think too hard about where it goes after that. And yet, in spite of the mess and the smell and the fumbling and half-light, you don't complain. No one does. This is just how it's done. You even keep a little jar of rose-scented vinegar by the windowsill, just in case you need to mask an unfortunate moment. Some women soak their rags in it before disposal, a trick passed quietly between friends. You tie your robe tighter and light a match to spark the bedside candle. It flickers, catches, and warms your face. The worst of the morning is over. Well, almost. You sit on the edge of your bed now, wrapped in your dressing gown, the last curl of match smoke vanishing into the rafters. You reach for a comb to tidy your hair, but your thoughts are still stuck on what just happened. Not because it was shocking, but because it was so very normal. And yet, if you look closely, the idea of toilet paper, real, soft, factory-made paper, is starting to creep into your world. You saw it once at a dressmaker's shop, tucked beside the sink like a luxury item. Smooth, folded sheets, imported, whispered about like silk stockings or French perfume. But here's the truth. Even as toilet paper starts to appear, most homes aren't ready for it. Indoor plumbing is still patchy. Pipes freeze. Drainage is unreliable. In the city, the upstairs water closets are newfangled and unpredictable. More than once you've heard of someone pulling the chain only for it to backfire, literally. So women, clever as ever, adapt. You've seen your aunt use lace trimmings from a ruined petticoat. You've seen a governess roll up scraps of fabric to reuse, then rinse in vinegar and hang by the stove. Nothing is wasted, not even in the loo. And of course, there's the delicate question of what gentlemen do. They pretend they're above it all, but you've seen them too. Carefully folding squares from old letters, tearing margins from outdated ledgers, even slipping a servant's sixpence to fetch something clean from the chemist's. Privacy is a myth, and shame is doled out unevenly. At your last visit to the countryside, you stayed in a house that kept a wooden box labelled privy paper. Inside, corn cobs. You nearly fainted. The host claimed it was perfectly sanitary. You didn't ask for proof. And then, of course, there's the final horror, running out. It's why you keep your stash under the basin. Carefully folded, replaced weekly. It's not elegant, but it's yours. Some women hide theirs in sewing baskets or glove boxes just in case. As you begin to dress, sliding into your chemise and reaching again for your corset, you think of the future. Maybe someday someone will invent something soft and clean that every woman can afford. Maybe bathrooms will have warm water and buttons and lights. Maybe no one will have to tear up the birth announcements just to stay tidy. But until then, you fold another square of newspaper and tuck it into your pocket, just in case. Because in the world of Victorian womanhood, even toilet paper is a battle. You shift your weight from one foot to the other, adjusting the thick layers of petticoat and flannel drawers clinging to your thighs. Something doesn't feel quite right. You know what day it is, or rather, what week. You've been dreading it since the twinges started yesterday, and now, without fail, it's arrived. Your monthly visitor. Victorian womanhood doesn't prepare you for comfort. It prepares you for silence. So you say nothing. Instead, You reach beneath the washstand, where a small linen pouch holds your monthly supplies. They're rudimentary, reused, and carefully hidden from sight. You draw out a square of soft wool flannel, folded, washed, and folded again. It's part of a larger set stitched at home. You remember your mother showing you how to hem the edges to avoid fraying. She never said the word menstruation, only your time, and even then, in a whisper. You learn to read bloodstains like other girls read tea leaves, quietly and with some shame. You attach the cloth pad to a belt fastened around your hips. It's crude but functional. The belt is made of twill tape, and the pad hangs from it, secured by safety pins that dig in if you move too quickly. You've tried sewing buttons into it, but they come loose. One girl you knew tried wax thread. It melted. There's also the sponge. Not the dish kind, the sea sponge. Soaked in vinegar and cut to size. Some women swear by it. You tried it once and the memory still makes you wince. It was unpredictable. These tools are not talked about openly, yet every woman uses them. And every woman has her tricks, layering extra petticoats, wearing darker skirts, stuffing lavender sachets into drawers to mask any hint of blood. Some burn their used cloths in the hearth, others boil them in secret at night. You prefer to rinse them in cold water and hang them near the stove, behind other laundry, of course. You remember your cousin fainting at church one summer. Her drawers were soaked through, and she hadn't brought a change. No one said anything, but the women knew. They always know. The priest, of course, looked horrified, as if women weren't made of flesh, your aunt had hissed afterward. If you work, it's harder. You've heard of shop girls sitting on folded rags for hours, unable to move. Factory women simply endure it. There's no time to change and no privacy to try. You once visited a textile mill and saw a girl tear a strip from her apron, knot it between her legs and keep working. You never forgot her face. And so today, you tie the belt, pin the cloth, and brace yourself for the hours ahead. You know how to walk to reduce shifting. You avoid sudden stares, and you sit carefully, folding your skirts just so. You glance at the small bottle of vinegar on the shelf. Some women drink it to delay their flow. Others claim it shortens it. You're not sure, but you've tried both. In this house, vinegar is more than a condiment. It's medicine, cleaner, and monthly ritual. You go about your day with a practiced grace, each movement calculated to avoid discomfort, each step carefully measured. But beneath your skirts, the cloth pad begins to shift slightly, and you feel the tug of the safety pin pressing into your side. There's no fixing it now, not unless you excuse yourself, find privacy, and start again. But privacy is a luxury few women have, especially during this time. And so, like your mother and your grandmother before her, you endure. By mid-afternoon, you're warm, slightly damp, and fully aware of your body in a way that's neither pleasant nor freeing. You excuse yourself from conversation more than once. Your hands tremble a little as you pour tea. The men in the room wouldn't know, couldn't imagine that you're bleeding into a piece of cloth tied around your waist while they debate the merits of railroads and rising sugar prices. The worst part? Not the physical discomfort. It's the silence. Menstruation isn't just unspoken. It's erased. You once saw a health manual with an entire section on feminine irregularities, written in such vague euphemisms that you weren't even sure what it meant until years later. And doctors? Most won't even look you in the eye if you mention cramps. They prescribe laudanum or bed rest, neither of which help when your maid is out sick and your brother's children are arriving for supper. So you learn to hide it. You fold extra cloth in your pocket. You carry a sachet of rose petals or dried lavender. Some women keep a sprig of mint to press against their wrists, just in case the smell begins to betray them. Others rely on sheer willpower and darker gowns. There are rumours, whispered in the sewing circle, about women who have better ways. One claims to have imported rubber drawers from France, washable, discreet, and expensive. Another swears by bundles of moss wrapped in linen changed 3 times a day, and a widow once mentioned the use of cotton wool soaked in vinegar, tied with ribbon and worn like a secret. You tried that too. Once. Never again. By evening, the fatigue settles in like fog. You feel the ache across your lower back, the weight in your hips, the dull pounding behind your eyes. But the house is not quiet. Supper must be served. Faces must be pleasant. You smile, you nod, you laugh at something inane. And all the while you're bleeding silently into cloth that you will boil in a pot tomorrow while no one is looking. Before bed, you undress slowly. The pad is heavy now, dark and damp. The safety pin rusting slightly at the tip. You drop it into the laundry pail with a soft splash and reach for a fresh square. This one smells faintly of rosemary. You stitched it yourself from a ruined underskirt last winter. You lie down on the mattress, curl your knees gently and try not to think of anything at all. Because you'll do it all again tomorrow, and the day after that, and no one, not your brothers, not your doctor, not your priest, will ever know. You've been invited to tea at a friend's home. Nothing too formal, but nice enough to warrant your best day dress. You pull it from the armoire, admiring the soft folds of the green skirt. It's new. Well, new to you. It came from your aunt's cousin, who wore it twice before declaring it too bold. But you adore the colour. It shimmers like beetle wings in sunlight, vibrant, deep, utterly alive. What you don't think about, at first, is what makes it shimmer. You slip it on and fasten the bodice, your corset already firm beneath. The sleeves taper just so, the bustle sits properly, but as you brush a hand down the skirt, a fine green dust comes off on your fingertips. You pause, then shrug. It's probably just fabric dressing. You're wrong. That glowing green comes from Shields green or perhaps Paris green, a pigment derived from copper arsenite, arsenic, the same toxic element you've encountered before in face creams, now part of your wardrobe. It was the rage last season. Fashion magazines called it a hue fit for queens, and indeed, Queen Victoria herself reportedly admired the shade, though she may not have worn it. But here's the danger. The dye doesn't stay put. It flakes. It powders. It can be absorbed through the skin. Some seamstresses refuse to handle the fabric without gloves. One London milliner claimed her apprentice developed sores along her arms, just from stitching green ribbons day after day. Still, the colour is breathtaking. You feel a little bolder, a little more seen when you wear it. A friend once said you look like springtime wrapped in silk. You blushed, despite knowing your springtime was laced with poison. On the omnibus, you sit next to a woman who admires your dress and asks where you bought it. You smile, but don't answer. It's easier that way. Meanwhile, the heat of your body begins to stir the fibres of the skirt. You notice a faint metallic tang in the air. It might be your imagination, or not. At tea you begin to feel a bit flushed. Not enough to worry anyone, just a subtle warmth behind the eyes. You excuse yourself and step into the drawing room, pretending to admire a painting while pressing your gloved hands to your cheeks. The gloves are stained faint green. You say nothing. That evening, you return home and remove the dress carefully. You fold it inside out to avoid spreading any more of the pigment and store it in a canvas wrapper. Your hands tingle. You wash them twice with carbolic soap. The green still lingers, but you'll wear it again. Because despite the risk, despite what you've read and what you feel, you can't resist the way it turns heads. In a world where your voice is soft, your space small, and your opinions gently dismissed, a dangerous dress feels like power, even if it bites back. The next morning, as you brush your hair before the mirror, you notice a faint red mark beneath your collarbone. It wasn't there yesterday. You touch it, curious, no pain, just a little patch of irritated skin right where the green fabric rested against your chest. You've heard of this before. They call it arsenic rash, though not in polite company. Some women develop it after a few wearings, others after just one. It appears like a whisper, first as irritation, then as weeping sores. One shop girl you know was forced to leave her job after her arms blistered from a batch of dyed gloves. The manager blamed her delicate constitution. You dab rose water on the spot and tie a ribbon around your neck to hide it. The dress remains folded in the canvas wrapper, tucked high on a shelf. Not out of reach, just waiting. By mid-morning, you're back at your sewing work. Your fingers ache slightly from yesterday's stitching, but you're used to that. You're hemming a hem for your neighbour's daughter, a blue day dress trimmed with ruffles. Beside you sits a scrap of that infamous green, discarded during alterations. It still glows in the light, still dusts your skin with its shimmer. You pause and hold the scrap up to your nose. There's that smell again, like copper and crushed gra. You wonder what it must be doing to your lungs. The thought passes. Fashion is always a trade, and the trade here is silent. You've watched ladies turn green, literally green, along the edges of their gloves. You've watched bouquets droop faster in rooms with arsenic-dyed wallpapers, and still no one speaks of it above a murmur. A doctor once wrote an article in The Lancet about it, warning of domestic poisoning. But who has time to read medical journals when there's tea to serve and hems to finish? Besides, the fabric is still sold, still popular, still draped in shop windows and trimmed with white lace. It's too beautiful to ban, and that's the point. Danger disguised as elegance is half the thrill. You once overheard two gentlemen discussing the issue at a dinner party. One laughed and said, "Well, if the ladies insist on dying to be fashionable, who are we to stop them?" The other replied, "Let them wear grey." You spilled soup in his lap. But in private, women do what women always do. They adapt. Some wear a chemise with a high neckline under green bodices. Some line their gloves in silk. A few brave souls have sworn off the colour entirely, but their wardrobes look a bit plainer for it. You glance again at your wrapped dress. Maybe you'll save it for special occasions. Maybe you won't wear it at all. Or maybe, when no one's looking, you'll slip it on again and feel that spark, the boldness, the shimmer, the silent defiance that comes from wearing something beautiful, even if it burns. And when someone compliments it, you'll smile and say, "Thank you, it's just something I had lying around." The streets smell like horses and coal smoke. 2 scents you've grown used to, though never fond of. As you step out into the morning air, you instinctively reach for the handkerchief tucked into your sleeve. It's a dainty square of linen trimmed with lace and dabbed with rose oil, and it's not just for decor. You lift it to your nose, as ladies do. It looks delicate, genteel, but it's doing far more than maintaining appearances. It's your shield. Victorian cities are an assault on the senses. The Thames reeks like something alive and rotting, especially in the warmer months. The tanneries let out a stench so thick it coats the back of your throat. Add to that the odours of unwashed bodies, spoiled meat and horse dung piled on cobblestones, and even the most dignified woman might retch mid-crossing. That's why you, and every woman you know, carry scent-drenched handkerchiefs, not for fashion, but survival. Yours is steeped in lavender and bergamot. You rescent it weekly using a little crystal vial bought at a stall off Fleet Street. The woman who sold it to you swore it came from Paris, more likely Camden. But the scent is heavenly, and when you hold the cloth to your nose, it transforms the world around you, if only briefly. Some ladies prefer stronger aromas, patchouli, attar of roses, even clove. You once met a widow who carried a handkerchief soaked in camphor and said it kept her from fainting on the omnibus. You believed her. The smell nearly knocked you over. And then there are the truly unusual methods. One woman at your sewing circle claims she tucks a sliced lemon into her reticule and presses it discreetly against her nostrils when the air grows thick. Another soaks dried orange peels in gin and carries them in a velvet pouch. She says it sharpens the brain. But your favourite by far is the woman who stitched a secret pocket into her petticoat, filled with crushed thyme and salt. For train stations, she said, eyes wide. The urinals, the fishmongers, the men. You made one yourself the very next day. Of course, scent is more than armour. It's currency. A woman's fragrance speaks before she does. Sweet scents imply youth and innocence. Musk suggests mystery, or worse, experience. There are perfumes worn only in morning, others only in spring. A lady of discretion knows when to wear nothing at all. Today, though, you're not feeling delicate, so you press your handkerchief closer and breathe deep. Rose and lavender, clean linen, a faint trace of starch, and beyond it, horse, ash, smoke. You take another breath and walk on. By midday, the sun has warmed the streets just enough to wake the city's most pungent secrets. You pass a butcher shop, and the sour smell of blood clings to your skirt like a clumsy suitor. A boy nearby is emptying a chamber pot into the gutter, its contents sloshing far too close to your boots. You step sideways with silent precision and press the handkerchief to your nose. Again, harder this time. The scent is fading. The rosewater is losing its fight. You make a mental note to rescent it tonight. Perhaps with something stronger, something citrusy. Your friend Eleanor swears by a mixture of vinegar and cloves. Like being slapped awake, she says with a grin. And maybe that's what you need. Something that reminds you you're alive and still, somehow clean. Because being a woman in the city means constantly negotiating between disgust and dignity. You've learned to walk with your skirt slightly lifted, your gaze low but not too low, always on alert for the next olfactory ambush. Even the nicest neighbourhoods have their dark corners, privies leaking into alleyways, public fountains tainted with who knows what. Once, during a visit to Bloomsbury, you passed a lady who'd fainted dead away on the pavement. The cause? A fishmonger's stall left unattended in the heat. You offered her your handkerchief. She took one breath and promptly fainted again. Yours was too floral. She needed mint. Some women carry vinaigrettes, tiny silver capsules with sponge soaked in vinegar and herbs. You've always wanted one. They click open like secrets. One whiff, and the world sharpens. But they're expensive. A true vinaigrette costs more than your best shoes. You've improvised, of course. A lace glove sprayed lightly with rosewater, a scarf soaked in lavender then dried in the sun, even a little twist of wax paper filled with mint leaves. Once, in desperation, you crushed a peppermint lozenge between your teeth and just breathed through that. But nothing quite compares to a well-worn handkerchief washed and pressed, scented with care, and folded twice before being tucked into a sleeve. It's more than fabric. It's a statement. I am prepared. I am protected. I may walk through filth, but I will not become it. As you finally return home, your head aches faintly from the cocktail of smells you've endured. You unpin your hat and peel off your gloves. The handkerchief, once white, is now tinged with soot and street dust. But it served you well. You lay it flat beside your wash basin and pour a few drops of lavender oil onto it. You press it with your fingers, fold it again, and slide it back into your sleeve. Tomorrow, the city will rise again with all its noise and smells and smoke. But you'll be ready, and you'll face it all gracefully, quietly, with a little lace square between your breath and the world. You reach for your reticule before stepping out, giving it the slightest tug to check the clasp. It's a dainty little thing, about the size of a teacup saucer, made of crocheted silk with a braided drawstring and tasseled bottom. From a distance it looks almost useless. From up close it still looks almost useless. But appearances deceive. The reticule is the Victorian woman's answer to the pocket. A visible, fashionable replacement that says, "Look, I carry things, but not too many." Yours is robin's egg blue, slightly faded, a birthday gift from your cousin who stitched your initials into the lining in tiny uneven thread. It's charming, it's familiar, and it holds just enough. A handkerchief, a scent vial, a folded card, 3 coins and a single key. What it won't hold: your gloves, your diary, your temper. The reticule's very size is a performance. It suggests you have no burdens, no obligations, no messy distractions. You're light, mobile, carefree. You don't carry ledgers or receipts because someone else handles that. You don't carry work. You are work. You watch your neighbour struggle to squeeze her spectacles into a velvet reticule, failing again. She laughs it off, calls herself clumsy. But you know the truth. There's no clumsiness here. Just a design meant to restrict. A fashionable prison, lined in satin. Still, the reticule is not without power. Women have long mastered the art of hiding meaning in small things. Yours, for instance, contains a scrap of writing, folded paper, nearly rubbed smooth, with a date and a name you haven't said aloud in months. It stays there like a pressed flower, delicate and dangerous. Sometimes, in quiet moments, you reach inside and run your fingers over it like prayer beads. And there are social rituals too. The way you open it just so during tea, offering a glimpse of lace or letter, a hint of mystery. The way you let it dangle from your wrist as you walk, swinging with each step like punctuation. In the absence of speech, a reticule can say plenty. There are rules, of course. You never place it on the floor, vulgar. Never search it too long in public, desperate. Never let it bulge with odd shapes, undisciplined. You once saw a woman bring out a crust of bread from hers. The room went silent, but still, in that tiny pouch, you carry the things that matter. The note, the coin for emergencies, the soft square of cloth scented with lavender, and something else, something you almost forgot. A ring, not yours. You hadn't meant to keep the ring. Not really. It fell into your reticule during that final conversation, if you could even call it a conversation. More like an exchange of glances, a tremble of fingers, a sigh that said everything and nothing all at once. He placed it on the table between you, wrapped in a silk handkerchief. "Keep it or don't," he said, not meeting your eyes. "But if you carry it, you carry the choice." And then he left. Quietly, like something slipping through the cracks in a wall. You carried it. At first you told yourself it was temporary, just until you decided, just until the storm passed, just until your head cleared. But now, months later, it's still in the bottom of your reticule, wrapped and hidden beneath the everyday things. A peppermint lozenge, a pencil stub, the frayed corner of a letter you've read far too many times. The ring itself is simple, gold, slightly warm from the touch, with a narrow twist at the band. No stone, just the memory of a promise never made. There's something oddly Victorian about it all, carrying a life-changing decision in a pouch the size of a scone. You think of the women who came before you, their reticules holding locks of hair, secret correspondence, tiny flasks of bitters or laudanum. One friend once confessed keeping a pressed moth in hers for good luck. Another admitted to smuggling out her husband's will during a family dispute. "No one checks a woman's handbag," she whispered, eyes gleaming. And they don't. Because they assume it's frivolous. A decoration. A thing with tassels and ribbon and no consequence. But you know better. You could change your future with the contents of this pouch. As you walk into the shop this afternoon, chin high, gloves buttoned, reticule swinging lightly at your wrist, You feel the weight of it. Not heavy, not oppressive, just present. A quiet reminder that, in a world where women are meant to be ornamental, even the smallest container can hold something explosive. You reach into your reticule to pay for a spool of thread. The coins jingle, the paper rustles, your fingers brush the corner of the handkerchief, but you don't unwrap it. Not yet. You're sitting at your vanity, lacing the tiny mother-of-pearl buttons on your gloves, when you hear the faint clink, metal against wood. Again, you sigh. Another hairpin has escaped. You retrieve it from the floor, slipping it back into your little tin marked pins and hooks, a container that now rattles like a pocket full of secrets. Because that's the thing no one warns you about. Being a Victorian woman means conducting a quiet war with your own wardrobe. You begin the daily ritual, checking every fastening. You twist around, peering over your shoulder at the row of buttons running up the back of your dress. They look delicate, like sugar pearls, but they are, in fact, the enemy. There are 18 of them, and not one can be reached without dislocating a shoulder or calling in the maid. You sigh again and begin with what you can reach, the cuffs, the gloves, the boots. And oh, the boots. You reach for your button hook, that curious little tool that lives somewhere between a crochet needle and a torture device. It's made of polished bone and fits perfectly in your gloved hand. With a flick and twist, it slips through the buttonholes on your ankle boots, fastening each stubborn little disc that your fingers, wrapped in silk, couldn't possibly manage alone. It takes time, precision, patience. A pinched finger here, a tugged thread there. You wince slightly as one button bites into your knuckle. These boots are narrow, designed not for walking but for showing. There's a difference. Once you watched a gentleman attempt to fasten a lady's boots without a hook. It took him 20 minutes and ended with a broken nail, a snapped button, and a flushed apology. You swore never to let anyone else do it again. But button hooks aren't just for boots. You keep a second one for gloves, and a third, shorter, sharper, for your bodice. There are hooks for corsets, hooks for petticoat clasps, hooks so thin they look like they belong in a dentist drawer. You've developed small calluses on your palms from using them daily, a badge of hidden labour. And then there are the hairpins, dozens of them, scattered across your vanity like fallen soldiers. Some are curved, some straight. Some grip like iron. Others slide out the moment you laugh too hard. You've had one poke through your hat and nick your scalp at a funeral. You said nothing, of course. In your workbox you keep a set of extra pins, a spare button hook, and a pair of tiny embroidery scissors that double as weapons in a pinch. Last year, a friend of yours used hers to cut herself free from a corset during a fainting spell. Another jabbed hers into the hand of a man who stepped too close during a crowded train ride. An accident, she said sweetly. The blood said otherwise. These are the quiet tools of survival, not just dressing aids, not just accessories, but the sharp, cold proof that elegance has a cost, and it's paid in bruised fingers, snagged lace, and the steely patience to never, ever let anyone see you struggle. You place the last pin into your hair and examine yourself in the mirror. Everything looks smooth, effortless. But you know what's holding it all together: steel, bone, pressure, and the quiet cooperation of countless tiny tools. Your hands bear the marks of the morning's labour, a red line across the base of your palm from the button hook, a slight bruise at your wrist where your glove caught too tight, a flake of dried blood near your thumb where a corset stay pinched the skin. None of it shows, of course. That's the point. And it's not just you. Every woman you know moves through the world with a miniature armoury tucked into her person. One friend keeps a hat pin sharpened to a near needle point. It's for adjusting feathers, yes, but it's also there in case of situations. Another tucks a small sewing needle into her glove cuff, threaded and ready, because buttons fall and society doesn't wait. You remember your aunt telling you about a scandal where a lady's dress came undone at the shoulder mid-ball. The hook had snapped, and the poor girl fled the room in tears. Since then, your aunt wears hidden stitches in her gown, a thread loop anchoring bodice to corset, invisible but unbreakable. A stitch in time prevents disgrace, she says. You've copied her technique faithfully. Even your accessories aren't exempt. Your brooch isn't just ornamental, it hides a tiny screwdriver, gifted to you by a cousin who repairs spectacles. You've used it 3 times, once to tighten a drawer pull, once to wedge a jammed window open, and once to repair a carriage lantern when the driver was too drunk to notice it had come loose. Everything you carry has a hidden use. Your chatelaine jingles lightly with scissors, keys, and vinaigrette. But the real secret is the needle case you've hollowed out to hide your emergency funds. A few silver shillings, tightly rolled banknotes, and one very small bottle of laudanum, just in case the pain ever becomes too much to bear in public. You never thought of yourself as clever, but you've learned, the hard way, learned how to pin without pricking, how to hook without tearing, how to smile while stitching a hem beneath the table during tea. Once, you even repaired the strap of your shoe mid-walk with a hairpin and a prayer. Because if there's one thing Victorian fashion teaches you, it's this. Nothing is truly secure. Not buttons, not locks, not reputations. Everything must be reinforced, clasped, repinned, or watched constantly. You step back from the mirror and smooth your skirts once more. Every layer is in place, every fastening firm, but just in case, you slip one more pin into your sleeve and feel its tiny strength against your wrist. A lady, after all, must always be prepared to hold herself together. Even when everything else threatens to come undone, you finally made it through the day. The bustle, the errands, the social pleasantries. Now the light is dimming, the lamp is lit, and it's time to undress. You exhale as your fingers fumble at the buttons, loosening the bodice, then untying the layers beneath. Your corset comes off with a sigh so deep it feels like it comes from your ribs. But even now, comfort isn't promised. You reach for your nightgown. It's thick, made of brushed cotton or wool flannel, depending on the season. Tonight's feels especially heavy, like pulling on a curtain. The sleeves puff at the shoulder, then narrow at the wrist. There's embroidery at the collar, your initials stitched by candlelight when you were younger, before your fingers began to ache from daily sewing. This isn't some silky, flowing garment that billows as you twirl. This is Victorian nightwear, practical, opaque, more fortress than fantasy, and under it, still more layers. A night chemise, maybe. Long drawers, unless it's the height of summer. Socks, always. Even a nightcap, though you sometimes toss it off in your sleep. You've woken more than once with the ribbon mark still etched across your forehead. You slip into bed and pull the heavy wool blanket over your legs. It smells faintly of lavender and the scorched iron your maid used to press it. You adjust the hot brick at your feet, wrapped in flannel, still radiating heat from the stove downstairs. There's no central heating, no warm floors, no gentle hum of a radiator. Warmth is built manually and slowly leaks away. And the air, cold, always cold. You breathe and see your breath hover above the blankets before dissolving. You clutch the covers tighter. It's strange to think of nightgowns as a battlefield, but they are. You once heard a woman joke that putting one on was like preparing for a siege. One must be ready for fire, visitors, or death, she said. She wasn't wrong. Modesty must be maintained even in slumber. A friend of yours once tore her nightgown escaping a fire, and despite the panic she cried over the fact that the doctor saw her in just a chemise. She had burns on her arm, but what really hurt was the embarrassment. You tug your own collar higher now just in case, not because you expect anything, but because it's how you were taught. Proper women don't let the night catch them unready, and just as you begin to drift, you feel a familiar itch at the hem of your gown. You reach down and find a thread, loose again. That's the third time this week. You make a mental note to repair it tomorrow, though you know it might be next week before you remember. Still, in the silence, wrapped in wool and linen and the quiet pressure of night, there is a kind of safety. You're armoured, even now. Sleep doesn't come quickly, not with the nightgown twisting at your knees and the blanket's weight pressing down like damp earth. You shift slightly, trying to find that elusive spot where the fabric doesn't bunch and the brick at your feet still feels warm. It's always like this. Cosy, but never quite comfortable. You listen to the house settling, a creak in the rafters, the distant clatter of the maid finishing her chores below, a drip somewhere from the wash basin. The sounds are familiar, almost comforting, but they don't ease the feeling of being swaddled like a parcel. Nightwear in your world isn't about rest, it's about readiness. Even now, your hair is loosely braided to avoid scandalous tangles. You wear socks because bare feet are indecent. Your nightgown, with its high collar and long sleeves, could pass for a day dress if viewed in the wrong light, and for many women it has been. Fires, illness, the surprise of a midnight knock. You recall the story of a woman down the street whose brother returned from the war without warning. She greeted him at the door in her nightgown, and the neighbours whispered for weeks. That's why some women sleep with dressing gowns folded at the foot of the bed, just in case. You do too. Yours is a plain blue flannel wrap, slightly frayed at the hem, but always pressed and ready. One tug and you could be presentable in under 30 seconds. Still, not everything about this ritual is restraint. Your nightgown, for all its thickness, carries memories. The faded stitching at the sleeve reminds you of evenings spent reading by firelight. The tiny patch spot near the knee recalls the night you spilled lavender oil and tried to blot it out before anyone noticed. It still smells faintly of flowers and embarrassment. You've had this gown for years, rehemmed it twice, sewn new buttons on the collar. Once, during a head cold, you wore it for 3 days straight, and it comforted you more than your family did. It holds your shape when folded. It remembers the curve of your spine. Even so, you sometimes envy the freedom you imagine other women might have. Those fictional women in French novels, who sleep in gauze and silk, who leave their shoulders bare to moonlight. You tried that once, years ago, with a borrowed dressing robe. You caught a chill that lasted a week and swore never again. So now you lie beneath your thick blanket wrapped in layers, knowing full well that comfort was never the goal. Cleanliness, modesty, preparation, these are the pillars of Victorian rest. And still you sleep, slowly, deeply, with the weight of your gown anchoring you to the bed. It may be stiff, itchy, and unnecessarily warm, but it's yours. It's familiar. And for now, that's enough. You pull the covers up to your chin and drift toward dreams that smell faintly of starch and soap. The morning sun is barely a suggestion through the curtains when you hear the soft jingle, a tiny clink of metal on metal like a wind chime deep in a forest. You reach to your side and feel it, the weighty presence hanging from your waistband beneath your dressing gown, your chatelaine. It's not a name you speak often, but you always know it's there. A chain of little tools, small scissors, a thimble, a needle case, a vinaigrette, and your most prized possession, the household keys. You lift your chatelaine into the light and examine it as you've done every morning for years. The polished steel glints faintly, dulled in places from handling. Each tool swings from its own little chain, clipped onto the decorative clasp at your waist. Some women wear theirs like jewellery, silver-plated, monogrammed, even adorned with cameos. Yours is simpler, practical, and slightly mismatched. A gift from your mother when she passed her keys to you. That was the day you became mistress of the house, not just in title, but in expectation. The scissors are small, but sharp enough to snip through corset strings or stubborn thread. You use them daily, mending, trimming, correcting. You once used them to cut a roast string when the cook went home sick. The handle bears a tiny nick from that very day. Next to them hangs your needle case, shaped like a tiny cylinder. Inside, 3 steel needles, one slightly bent from overuse, and a coil of dark thread. You keep them not just for convenience but for emergencies. Popped buttons, frayed seams, even unexpected tears in the lace tablecloth before tea. And then there's the vinaigrette, a tiny hinged case with a perforated lid. Inside, a sponge soaked in lavender vinegar. It's your quiet defense against faintness, filth, or the smell of illness. More than once you've pressed it to your nose while visiting someone's sickbed. It feels strangely intimate to carry a tool both for comfort and protection, like a charm from another time. But none of these things compare to the keys. 4 of them hang in a row, each distinct. One for the pantry, one for the silver drawer, one for the linen press, and the smallest for your own writing desk. They swing like medals of quiet power. No man in the house knows which key opens what. That's your realm. You remember the first time a maid asked you for the sugar key. Your hand shook slightly as you handed it over, then took it back just as quickly. With those keys came control, but also duty. You're the first to rise, the last to sleep. You approve the accounts, track the soap rations, count the spoons. Every time something goes missing, every time something runs low, it's your name the butler whispers behind closed doors. Even your sleep is lighter now. You listen for movement in the night, footsteps on the stair, the rattle of a coal bin, the squeak of a pantry door. You never expected keys to keep you awake, but they do. You fasten the chatelaine at your waist again. The weight is familiar, like the hem of responsibility brushing your hip. And so the day begins, with scissors, keys, and the quiet clink of command. By late morning, the house is fully alive, pots rattling in the kitchen, footsteps tapping across the upper hall, and someone downstairs is already asking where the sugar has gone. You reach for your chatelaine again, fingers instinctively seeking the pantry key. It turns in your hand like an old friend, warmed by years of use and quiet authority. The staff doesn't question the key bearer, not because they're afraid, but because the role itself commands a certain reverence. You're the one who balances thrift and grace, who decides whether the good jam is open for guests or saved for Sunday. A woman who wears the chatelaine wears the weight of the household's rhythm. Still, there's more than order hanging from your waist. The vinaigrette swings gently as you descend the stairs. You crack it open for a moment, letting the vinegar-scented air clear your head. The parlour smells faintly of last night's coal fire, and you have a headache building just behind your temples. A quick breath through the tiny silver case and you feel sharper. Awake. Your grandmother used to say the chatelaine was the closest a woman could get to carrying a sword. Hers had a letter opener instead of scissors, and a small flask tucked in beside her keys. You found it once, long after she passed. The metal was engraved with the initials of a man no one in the family dared mention. Not everything on a chatelaine is practical. You've added a few pieces of your own, a tiny notepad tucked inside a folding silver case, where you scribble household notes, or the occasional private thought when the mood strikes. And hanging beside it, a pencil stub, sharpened with your sewing scissors, still etched with the name of the stationer who once pressed it into your hand and called you dangerously observant. You've never quite figured out if that was meant as a compliment. These objects don't just organise your day, they tell your story. The scissors dulled by love letters cut into ribbons, the thimble dented by a dropped baking tray. The key that no longer fits any door but you wear anyway because it reminds you of something you won't speak aloud. At gatherings, other women glance at your waist and nod. Chatelaines clink together in unspoken conversation. You once saw one that held a miniature portrait in a locket, dangling beside a tape measure. Another bore a whistle, discreetly hung between a spool of thread and a needle case. "For when my boys fight," the woman said, with a grin that revealed one gold tooth. And of course, the status they represent isn't just domestic. A well-worn chatelaine marks you as capable, trusted, indispensable. You're the one who knows where the brandy is hidden, when the milk delivery is due, and how many towels are still clean after the cousin from Devon arrived, unannounced. When you finally sit down to mend a tear in the dining room curtain, you lift the scissors from your hip without thinking. Snip, thread, pinch, tie. The rhythm is part of you now. Each piece of the chatelaine moves with muscle memory. Quiet, precise, unyielding. And when the day ends and the house grows quiet, you'll unclip it gently, place it on the velvet tray by your bed, and exhale. But not before checking, one last time, that all 4 keys are still there. You're sitting near the window with a teacup cooling in your hand. When you catch your reflection in the glass, you smile faintly, and then you remember. Don't smile too wide. You've trained yourself not to, not because of manners or modesty or any notion of feminine restraint, but because of your teeth. They've never been quite right. Yellowed slightly from years of tea, a small chip in the left incisor from when you bit down on a too hard almond in '79. A crooked lower row that no lace collar can distract from. But the real trouble, the thing that keeps you from laughing too loudly or smiling too eagerly, is the widening gap at the back where 2 molars once lived. You lost them young. The dentist, if you can call him that, used a clamp, a towel, and a bottle of gin. You were 17. You haven't been the same since. In the world you live in, teeth aren't just tools for eating. They're status, their reputation, and they're deeply, painfully expensive. You know women who've had false teeth made from walrus ivory, porcelain, or even real human teeth, pulled from cadavers and stitched onto gold wire. One cousin had a partial plate fitted last winter. She removed it at dinner by mistake and dropped it into her soup. No one mentioned it, but everyone noticed. And yet, the opposite can be just as complicated. You once met a woman at a garden party with perfectly blackened teeth. Not from decay, on purpose. She'd lived in the East for a time, and in some cultures it's considered beautiful, even noble, to have teeth black as ink. She spoke softly, with a smile that hovered like a shadow. It was arresting, unsettling, mesmerizing. You couldn't stop looking. And then there's the widow who wears no teeth at all. She chews carefully, hums when nervous, and sips her soup with a quiet grace. No one pities her. She has presence. She's made peace with her gums. But you? You're caught between worlds, not wealthy enough for a proper dental plate, not bold enough to embrace the flaws, not old enough to excuse them. So you do what most women do. You smile small. You turn your head when you laugh. You press your tongue to the roof of your mouth to obscure the gap. And you carry a clove in your reticule, not for breath, but for the dull ache that sometimes returns in the back of your jaw long after the molars are gone. Once a young man complimented your smile, said it reminded him of something warm. You blushed, of course, and turned away. Not because you were modest, but because you were relieved he hadn't seen the missing tooth. You sip your tea now, lukewarm and quiet, and trace the rim of the cup with your finger. You've considered writing to that new dentist in Kensington, the one with the mirrorless chair and chloroform, but you're not ready yet. Instead, you dab your lips with a napkin, straighten your posture, and practice your most elegant half-smile, the one that shows nothing at all. Later, that evening, You sit before the looking glass and examine your mouth, not out of vanity but curiosity. You part your lips slightly and trace the ridge of your gum with a fingertip. The gap is still there, of course. You've grown used to its absence, but something aches deep beneath it tonight. Not physically, not entirely. A kind of quiet resentment. You think of the advertisements in the newspaper. False teeth so natural they fool even the wearer. You wonder what that means. How could one forget that part of them isn't real? And yet, so many do. The ladies at church, the matron at the hospital, even the woman who runs the dressmaker's shop, who lost nearly every tooth after a fever and now wears a perfect porcelain smile. You heard her laugh once. It was hollow, brittle, and too bright, like a cup about to crack. Still, there's envy in you, because while they can remove their flaws and tuck them away in velvet cases, you live with yours and cover them daily. You reach into your drawer and pull out the little pot of tooth powder. It's chalky and minty, made from burnt shells and soap and sometimes crushed charcoal. You dip your brush in, not because you expect miracles, but because rituals bring comfort. Some women rub their teeth with salt, others with lemon peel or baking soda. You once tried a recipe from Mrs. Beeton's household guide, involving myrrh and sage boiled into a rinse. It burned, but it made you feel, briefly, in control. You recall your mother's warning, a woman's smile is her calling card. You were 12 and she had just pulled a thread from your sleeve before a dinner guest arrived. You didn't understand the weight of it then, now you do, which is why you've made peace with the half smile, the turned cheek, the quiet chuckle behind a gloved hand. You've perfected the art of laughter without teeth. But not all moments allow such grace. At a wedding last spring you were caught off guard. The groom, barely 20 with dimples deep as teacups, told a joke during the vows. You laughed, loudly, openly. It echoed in the church, and for a second you forgot to hide. You caught your reflection later, in the polished side of a serving tray. The gap gleamed like a flaw in porcelain, but the smile, that moment, was real, and for once you didn't flinch. Now you close the drawer, let the candlelight flicker against your jaw, and trace the curve of your lip. Maybe one day you'll have the coin and courage to visit the Kensington dentist. Maybe not. But tonight, in the quiet of your room, you smile wide, just for you. No audience, no mirrors, no shame. Just you, and a mouth that's lived. The cupboard creaks as you open it, revealing a row of little bottles, brown glass, cork-stoppered, some with faded labels curling at the edges. You reach for the one marked tonic for nerves. The liquid inside sloshes thickly, the colour of weak tea, though the smell is sharp, sweet, and oddly medicinal. Your head has been pounding since morning. Not a sharp pain, but the kind that lingers behind the eyes, like a visitor too polite to leave. You unstop the bottle, pour a measure into the silver-plated teaspoon and swallow. It's bitter, thick with herbs, maybe a trace of molasses, and something else, something warm and quieting. You sit down slowly, feeling the familiar bloom of calm stretch through your chest. The label doesn't say what's in it, not exactly, but you've read enough to guess. Laudanum, probably. A trace of morphine, if the pharmacist was generous. Your aunt used to call it her restorative. Your cousin said it gave her pleasant sleep. You just call it Thursday, because in a Victorian household remedies are everywhere, and most of them would make your modern doctor faint. There's the camphor oil you rub on your temples, the one that stings your eyes if you use too much. The little blue pills for woman's complaints, which you suspect are just sugar and iron. The bottle of syrup of figs for digestion, which tastes exactly like its name and works exactly like a curse. And the infamous family cough elixir, Equal parts honey, brandy, vinegar and turpentine. You've taken it twice this week. It tastes like regret. Your father's cabinet holds even stronger stuff. Chloroform, sealed and wrapped in cloth. Nitrate of silver. Spirits of ammonia. You once saw him treat a cut with carbolic acid and he didn't flinch. You did. It smelled like death in a bottle, but it's the homemade remedies that carry the most charm and danger. You've tried onion poultices for chest colds, garlic syrup for fevers, a mustard plaster once, slapped on your back during a chill so fierce you thought your teeth would crack. It burned, blistered, and left a faint yellow stain on your shoulder that lasted a fortnight. And then there's castor oil, always castor oil, for constipation, for skin, for hair, for anything anyone can't explain. You choke it down with tea, grimace, and wait. It never fails to work, but it never feels kind either. You glance again at your shelf lined with quiet poisons dressed as kindness. You've grown skilled at dosing, a few drops for nerves, a capful for cramps, a generous pour for grief. You once gave a neighbour the wrong bottle, meant to hand her tonic, gave her syrup of poppies instead. She slept for 14 hours and missed her niece's christening. You've never confessed. And yet, you keep these bottles, these powders, these jars of roots and rubs, because they are all you have. You're expected to endure pain without mention. These are your weapons, your comforts, your small rebellion against suffering in silence. As the tonic settles into your bones, you finally breathe. Slow, warm, steady. You'll feel better soon, at least for a little while. The fire crackles gently beside you as the tonic seeps deeper into your limbs. You lean back in the armchair and listen to the soft tick of the clock on the mantel. 3 seconds of peace between thoughts. The edge of your headache dulls, not vanished, but blurred like a face behind frosted glass. This is what passes for medicine in your world. A cabinet of bitters, burns and bottles wrapped in mystery. You know every label by heart, some handwritten in shaky cursive, others mass-printed with phrases like reputable for ladies' health or endorsed by royal households. But none of them come with instructions, only stories. There's the cough syrup your cousin took that turned her tongue black, the tonic that made your sister sleep for 2 straight days, the colic drops that stopped a baby's crying, and some whispered his breathing. But none of it is banned, because pain isn't the enemy, it's visibility. If you can walk, smile, nod and say, "I'm fine," you're treated as such. So you dose carefully, quietly, and share recipes only with women you trust. Your friend Eleanor makes her own tinctures from herbs. She grows in clay pots by the window, chamomile for sleep, valerian for nerves, licorice root for sore throats. You once helped her boil a mixture of wormwood and clove into a dark syrup. You joked that it looked like ink and tasted like revenge. She laughed, and then corked it tight for winter. You keep that bottle in your cupboard still, for emergencies. But not every remedy is swallowed. Some are worn. Your great-aunt stitched dried tansy leaves into her corset lining for the womb. Another neighbour pins a bag of dried yarrow near her chemise, claiming it wards off female melancholia. You've taken to wearing a bit of rosemary in your pocket, just because it smells clean, and sometimes that's enough. Still, it's the stronger things you think of when the world presses too hard. The laudanum with its amber lull, the bromide powders tucked into envelopes, the clove oil for toothaches that numbs more than just the gum, all tools in a kit you didn't ask for but learn to wield. Because a Victorian woman must never show her pain. She must bear it, bottle it, and, when possible, sweeten it with syrup and a smile. You sip tea now, made with crushed mint and a single drop of violet elixir. It tastes of gardens and medicine, and something else. something older. You once heard a midwife say, "Every woman is her own apothecary." At the time, it sounded poetic. Now, it sounds like a survival strategy. You glance at the firelight dancing on the bottles. Tomorrow you'll wash the spoon and label a new jar. Perhaps a lemon balm cordial, perhaps something stronger, but tonight you let the warmth wrap around you. The tonic dulls the ache in your jaw, the shadows settle across the room, your breathing deepens, you'll manage, you always do. With your cupboard of quiet cures and the knowledge that no one sees what it costs. You pause on the front steps, one gloved hand bracing your hat, the other clutching your skirts. The wind has picked up, and with it comes a battle you fight every time you leave the house. The hat. Today's is modest, broad-brimmed with silk trim and a stiff velvet ribbon beneath your chin. It's not the most dramatic one you own, not even the largest, but even so it catches the breeze like a sail, tugging at your scalp with every gust. You tilt your head forward and push a pin deeper into your hair. The pin bites, you wince, but the hat stays. Bareheaded in public is not an option. You may as well show up in your chemise. Victorian hats are more than accessories, they're social shields. To be seen without one is unthinkable. Even indoors, in some settings, a lady's hat remains on. At church, in shops, on visits. The hat becomes part of you, like a name you cannot take off. You walk carefully now, aware of how the brim affects your vision. You must turn your head to see the curb, dip slightly to pass through a door. Once, during a garden party, your hat was so wide it grazed two guests simultaneously as you passed. They laughed. You pretended not to hear. Later that day you found twigs stuck to the feathers, souvenirs from a low-hanging branch. And then there's the weight. Your Sunday hat is heavier than your cat. Plumes, artificial fruits, velvet rosettes, even tiny taxidermied birds. Each element a fashion statement, each secured with a series of hat pins sharp enough to draw blood. You've had bruises on your scalp. Once your hat was so heavy it gave you a headache that lasted 3 days, but you wear it, gladly even, because the hat does something a corset cannot. It announces, it signals class, trend and taste before you ever speak a word, and the millinery arms race is real. At every event, every stroll through Hyde Park or appearance at the theatre, there's a quiet comparison. Who has the tallest feathers? The most unusual trim? You once saw a hat shaped like a swan, head arched in mid-call. It looked absurd. You adored it. You recall one dinner where a guest refused to remove her bonnet even as the soup was served. She claimed it was part of the silhouette. The host later said she used it to avoid eye contact. Either way, it worked. You adjust your own brim as a carriage rattles past. The wind lifts the feathers slightly. You press the hat down with a firm palm. It resists. You win. A man passes, hatless, oblivious to the work required just to keep yours in place. You glance at his uncovered head and feel a surge of unfairness. He can walk freely, see clearly, hear without obstruction. You, meanwhile, are wearing a hat that could double as a small parasol and a defensive weapon. And yet, when you catch your reflection in a shop window, you smile. Because the hat is not just an inconvenience, it's a triumph. And even if your neck aches by evening, even if the pins leave marks and your ears buzz with the "wait, you will wear it again tomorrow," with pride. By late afternoon, your hat has grown heavier still. Not from actual weight, it hasn't changed, but from hours of careful posture, of adjusting your gait, of ducking through narrow doors and holding your chin just right. The hat is as much a discipline as a garment. You reach your friend's drawing room, cheeks flushed from the walk. She greets you with a smile and immediately compliments your plumage. Peacock, isn't it? You nod. It is, but only barely. A trimmed-down, faded version from last season, salvaged and re-dyed. You're not embarrassed. In fact, you're quietly proud of the repair. You did it yourself with a pot of ink, a dry brush, and a single sleepless evening. Across the room, a young woman turns her head, and the entire left side of her hat wobbles. An ivory cabbage rose, a stuffed sparrow, and a fan of gauze are precariously stitched together. Beautiful, laughable. You can't stop staring. She catches your eye and grins. For a moment, you're not competitors. You're conspirators. Because women in hats know something that men never will. The delicate, daring act of balancing absurdity with elegance. During tea, you place your gloves neatly on your lap and turn slightly to avoid knocking your brim against the guest beside you. She's done the same. It's a choreography of shadows and feathers. You both lean like trees in a strong breeze, smiling politely under 4 pounds of seasonal fashion. And always, the pins. You feel them even now. 4 of them anchoring the hat to your hair. You can recite their locations like compass points. 1 at the crown, 1 through the bun, 2 behind the ears. If one loosens, you'll feel it instantly, as if the entire structure might collapse in disgrace. It's happened before. You once spent a dinner party in a silent panic, pretending your hat wasn't listing like a sinking ship. Of course there are stories, legends even, about hat pins. One woman skewered a pickpocket's hand on a crowded tram. Another pinned her hat so thoroughly into her chignon that she had to cut it free that night. And everyone has heard the tale of the lady who nodded too enthusiastically during a lecture and jabbed herself behind the ear. Still, despite the danger, you wear your pins proudly. They are the hidden scaffolding of your day. No one sees them, but everyone sees their result. You, poised, balanced, correct. As the sun lowers and your visit draws to a close, you stand, smoothing your skirts and reaching, discreetly, for your chin strap. You loosen it slightly. Not off, of course. Just enough to feel your skin again. Air touches your jaw, and it feels like freedom. On the walk home, the wind has calmed. The streets are quieter. You pass a shop window and catch a glimpse of yourself. Hat tilting just so, profile neat and framed, the feathers catching the last gold light. You don't smile, you lift your chin. Because even if your scalp aches, even if your ears are red and your neck stiff, you know the power of a hat well worn, and tomorrow you'll choose another. Perhaps something wider, perhaps something with just a bit more danger. Back home, you untie your hat with a sigh of relief and place it gently on the dresser, feathers bobbing slightly as if also exhaling. The pins follow, one by one, tugged free with care, their points still gleaming. Your scalp throbs faintly from the tension they've held all day. But you're not done yet. There's still a drawer to check before bed. It's the small one, tucked discreetly beneath your writing desk, the one you never mention, and yet open every evening. You ease it out now, fingers grazing its contents like touching memories laid flat. Letters, bits of ribbon, a coin, and then what you came for, a lock of hair tied with faded blue thread. This drawer, this hidden collection, is your secret world. The lock belonged to your sister. She passed 4 winters ago. Fever, sudden and cruel. You snipped it from her comb before they sealed the casket. You haven't told anyone, but each night you untie the thread just to hold it once more. It still smells faintly of camphor and rosemary rinse. You don't cry, not anymore, but you also haven't stopped. Beneath it lies a folded note. The ink has bled slightly with time, but you know every word. It's not romantic. Not really. Just a line from someone who once said your eyes looked like bruised plums. Odd. A little rude. But it made you laugh for 3 days, and you've kept it since. He moved to Canada, or was it India? You lost track. But the note remains. There's a miniature there too. No larger than a biscuit painted on ivory. A stern man in profile. A relative, perhaps. You found it at the bottom of an old sewing chest and never asked who he was. But you liked his face. He seemed like someone who listened, and tucked beneath the velvet lining, your real treasure, a pressed violet, brown with age, folded into a page from a hymnal. You don't remember where you picked it. Maybe a funeral, maybe a spring walk where someone held your elbow longer than necessary. You've never unfolded the page. Every woman you know has a drawer like this, or a box, or a jar on the highest shelf. Your mother kept one beneath her mattress. Your friend Eleanor hides hers behind the pantry wall. One lady you met at church keeps hers in the hollow of an old Bible. They think it's faith, she whispered once, eyes twinkling. But it's just memory. These are the things women carry, not in handbags, not in chatelaines, but in silence. You return each item to its place, smoothing them flat. You hesitate over the hair, always the hair. Then tie the thread again, gently. The knot is loose on purpose. You might need to open it tomorrow, or the day after. You close the drawer gently, with the kind of care usually reserved for sleeping infants or delicate pastries. A soft click, and the world rights itself. The secrets are tucked away again. You stand, stretch slightly and feel the pop in your shoulders. The house is quiet now, save for the clock ticking softly and the faint shuffle of the maid below stairs. No one will disturb you, not tonight. But your mind lingers behind that drawer. There's something about those hidden objects that feels more real than anything else you've touched today. More honest than your bodice, more certain than the Sunday roast. They hold pieces of you that no one else sees, pieces you sometimes forget are even there. And yet every evening you return to them like prayers. You recall your grandmother, hands veined like a map, sitting by the hearth and telling you, a woman's drawer is where her voice goes when no one listens. At the time, you didn't understand. Now, it feels like the truest thing you know. Because it's not just about keepsakes, it's about permission. The freedom to grieve, to love, to remember, to do all the things you're expected to tidy away. You were taught how to host, how to stitch, how to pour tea without spilling. But no one taught you how to let go of a memory that smells like rosemary and winter air. So instead you store it. You press it flat and call it history. Some women burn their letters, others cut them into paper lace and use them for drawerliners. You could never. Even the envelope matters, even the stamp. That crooked postmark from Yorkshire feels as alive to you as a whispered goodbye. You think of your friend who keeps her late husband's collar button in a matchbox beside her gloves. She polishes it once a year. He hated that shirt, she told you, then smiled. Which is exactly why I kept it. You understand. Because women's lives are full of moments too small to mourn in public. A broken comb, a cancelled invitation, the last slice of cake eaten by someone who didn't ask. We're expected to carry it all, but invisibly, graciously. And so, we do. In drawers, behind books, under floorboards. You once read about a woman who quilted her grief into a patchwork coverlet, each square stitched with something no one else would ever decipher. You wonder how many households are covered in quiet sorrow, laid out on beds, mistaken for simple warmth. You light your candle for bed and glance one last time at the closed drawer. No one else will open it, and even if they did, they wouldn't understand. They'd see scraps. You see a life. Morning comes with a thud, a broom against the downstairs wall, the clatter of crockery, and the high-pitched voice of Mrs. Fielding berating the scullery maid. You sit up slowly, blinking the stiffness from your neck. Your legs are still wrapped in last night's nightgown, twisted like ropes. You swing them over the side of the bed and press your feet into your slippers. Today, like most days, begins with shoes. You lift the pair from under the dressing screen, ankle boots, polished to a dull shine. They've got delicate little heels, just high enough to be elegant, just low enough to be tolerable. The leather is tight around the instep, and the buttons on the side mock you with their neat precision. It will take 5 full minutes and the button hook to fasten them. You know this because you time it every day. You slip your feet in. The shoes don't greet you like old friends. They squeeze. They press. The left one bites a little near the toe where the leather has cracked and been patched. The right heel is uneven from wear. You consider putting in a bit of folded paper, your old trick, but think better of it. It never stays in place anyway. Victorian women's shoes are not made for walking. Not really. They're made for appearances, to peek out from beneath your skirt hem, to signal that you're refined, light on your feet, genteel. They're meant to suggest you glide, not stride. Which is a lovely idea until you have to cross a cobbled street slick with horse droppings and rain. You remember last winter when you fell on Crown Hill trying to chase a runaway letter. Your foot slipped on a stone and you landed in a puddle deep enough to soak through your stocking. The shoe split at the seam that very afternoon. The cobbler said you'd bent the leather in an unnatural way, as if walking at speed was some violation of design. Today you're only walking to the grocer. You pray the street won't be muddy. Your soles are thin enough to feel every pebble. There are fashionable boots with thicker treads, but they're frowned upon in town. Too masculine, they say. You once tried wearing a man's cast-off pair in the garden, and were told by your aunt that a lady's feet must never suggest defiance. So here you are, lacing dainty boots on a body that has work to do. And it's not just the pain, it's the pretense. The shoes are so narrow they've changed the shape of your feet. You've seen it in the bath, the toes turning inward, the arch deepening unnaturally. Your friend Maggie has corns so bad she walks with a limp on Sundays, and still she wears the lace-up ivory ones to church because they match her gloves. You admire a woman who wore boots to a suffragist rally once, flat brown, built for marching. She spoke from the back of a wagon about the right to vote and the right to stand without falling over. A few women scoffed. One whispered, "Did you see her feet?" But you clapped, quietly. Now, as you rise and take your first careful steps, the leather creaks and the pinch returns, the sound of civility, pressed into soles not built for pavement. You walk, but gently, because every step is a negotiation between fashion and pain. Outside, the sky's the colour of old milk, and the stones beneath your boots are slick from a morning drizzle. You tread carefully, eyes scanning the ground for puddles, loose gravel, or anything that might betray your footing. It's a peculiar skill, this Victorian walk, a slow, deliberate glide, dictated not by elegance, but survival. Your shoes betray you every few steps. You feel the slip before it happens. You adjust instinctively, ankles tight, knees slightly bent, not because you've been taught, but because you've learned. The difference between walking gracefully and falling face first into a cabbage cart is 1/2 inch of worn leather. You pass a boy running in bare feet. He darts between carts, laughing, his heels black with mud and joy. You envy him for just a moment. Then you look down at your own polished boots and remember what you'd be giving up. Dirt is freedom, yes, but freedom stains. You stop at the grocer's. It takes longer than expected. There's a queue, and your weight shifts from one sore foot to the other as you wait. No seat, no relief. Victorian fashion has no patience for pauses. Your arches burn. A numbness crawls up your toes. But you remain composed. The woman in front of you wears button shoes with silk inserts. Expensive, impractical, lovely. You notice a scuff on the outer edge of her left toe. You feel less alone. The grocer nods to you at last. You nod back, retrieve your parcel and begin the walk home. The weight of the package pulls slightly to one side. You adjust again, always adjusting. And then, halfway up the lane, you feel it. A tear. A tiny sound, almost inaudible but unmistakable. A seam giving way. The outer leather of your right shoe is split just near the base of the toe. A slow, steady yawning open, like a secret you can no longer keep. You don't stop. You can't. You shorten your stride and hope the gap doesn't widen. You pray no one notices, but someone always does. As you pass a woman at the lamppost, her gaze flickers downward. A pause, then back up to your face. No comment. Just that flicker. That millisecond of knowing. Shame is a quiet thing. It doesn't announce itself. It lives in glances, in hesitations, in the way you press your shoe more firmly to the ground, as if pretending nothing has changed. When you reach home, you remove your boots with aching hands. You trace the rip with your fingertip. It isn't large, but it's enough. Enough to ruin them. Enough to remind you how thin the line is between presentable and poor. You'll patch it, of course. The cobbler will shake his head, mutter something about women's shoes being made for show, not substance, and you'll agree, but you'll still wear them again, because you have to, because shoes are not just protection, they're proof. Proof that you're trying, that you still care, that you're walking the same cracked streets as everyone else, but with your chin high and your soles holding on, for now. The parlour is warm this afternoon, the fire crackling gently and the curtains drawn just enough to soften the light. You settle into the high-back chair by the window and unfold your fan with a soft snap. It's a practiced motion, fluid, casual, but deliberate. The kind of movement that draws no attention unless you want it to. Today, you do. Your fan is ivory, carved in a swirling pattern that catches the light. The silk leaf is painted with tiny violets, faded now, but still elegant. It was a gift from your cousin, who claimed it once belonged to a governess who married above her station. You've never verified the story, but you like the idea. The fan fits your hand like it remembers you. You move it gently now, side to side, stirring the air just enough to cool your cheeks. But it's not the temperature you're managing, it's the moment. In Victorian society, a woman's fan is far more than a tool against heat. It's a language, a silent code. You were taught it when you were 14, though no one said it aloud. You simply watched. How one lady opened hers with a flick to show interest. How another tapped the base against her lips when disapproving. How an entire conversation passed between two women at a summer ball without a single word spoken. You remember the scandal when a debutante dropped her fan in front of the wrong man. A mistake? A flirtation? A cruel joke? No one ever found out. But her engagement was broken within a fortnight. Even now, you use your fan when your words aren't safe. At church, when someone's sermon strays into uncomfortable territory, you raise it slightly, half covering your face as if to suppress a yawn. At dinner, when a guest becomes boorish, or the air too thick with cigars, you flutter it slowly, signalling discontent. No one dares ask why. They simply adjust. You once signalled an entire exit with your fan. A few meaningful glances across the room, a tap against your knee, a whisper behind silk, and then you were gone. No one saw the door open. No one heard your name, but you weren't missed, because your fan said goodbye for you. And of course, it's not always about escape. Sometimes the fan is a lure. You've tilted yours just so to signal interest, to shield your smile from the chaperone's gaze while revealing it to someone else. You've let it fall accidentally to see who would retrieve it. You've used it to hide a blush, or pretend to. Even now, as you sit by the fire, you notice someone approaching. One of the boarders, the quiet one with ink-stained cuffs and that habit of nodding instead of speaking. You don't rise. You don't speak. You lift your fan, fold it carefully and rest it on your lap. A neutral gesture, but not meaningless. Because in a world where a woman's words are rationed, her gestures must do more. And the fan, more than corset or hat or glove, is her most fluent voice. He nods as he passes, eyes lingering just a breath longer than courtesy. Allows. You say nothing. You only raise your fan again, tilt it slightly, not to cool yourself, but to veil half your face. Just enough mystery to be remembered, not enough to be accused. Moments like this are where the fan earns its place. It's not only about modesty or flirtation, it's about control. In a room where everyone else dictates the rules, you command silence and spectacle with a single flick of the wrist. Your fan lies between you and the world, a barrier and a bridge. Later, as guests arrive for tea, the parlour fills with murmurs, rustling skirts, the clink of spoons against porcelain, and everywhere, fans, feathered, fringed, painted, gilded, fans that match gloves, fans that smell of rose water, fans that hide yawns or worse, opinions. You watch as Mrs. Langley flutters hers rapidly while Miss Price tells the story about her brother's promotion. Too fast, too bright, a signal of disbelief. Across the room, a young woman lowers her fan just slightly while smiling toward a suitor. Barely a movement, but the invitation is unmistakable. And then there's you, still, deliberate, letting your fan rest on your lap once more, spine straight, mouth quiet. There's something delicious about holding a conversation where no one hears a word. But not all fans are playful. Some hold history. You own a black one, rarely used, wrapped in tissue at the bottom of a drawer. Mourning fan, given to you after your grandmother passed. The silk is stiff, the edges trimmed in jet beads that tinkle when shaken. It's heavy, not in weight, but in meaning. You've used it only twice, once at a funeral, once when you had nothing left to say and needed the room to feel it. The fan you use today is lighter, but no less sharp. You've cleaned its silk yourself with a damp cloth, tightened the rivet, oiled the tiny hinge with a drop of lavender oil. It creaks a little when opened, but you don't mind. Its voice is becoming older, wiser, like yours. There was a time you carried it nervously, unsure how to move it, when to raise it, afraid you'd flutter too fast and seem desperate, or too slow and seem aloof. But now the fan is part of your hand. Like a ring or a rosary, it's an extension of thought. You close it once more with a soft snap. Someone across the room turns instinctively. The sound is unmistakable, like the period at the end of a sentence no one else dares to speak aloud. And that's the magic of it, isn't it? In a world of loud men and careful women, the fan lets you speak volumes without raising your voice. It is in the end not just an accessory, but a weapon dressed as silk. The jar lives behind the mirror. You reach for it now, fingers brushing past a worn comb and a cracked powder box to retrieve the cool, round container. The lid resists at first, sealed shut by time and humidity, but you know how to coax it. A little twist, a lift, and the faint scent of camphor and something vaguely lemony greet your nose. Inside, the cream is dense, off-white, with a texture somewhere between wax and lard. You scoop out just a bit with your finger, as you've done every evening for years, and dab it gently beneath your eyes. The cold is sharp at first, then comforting. The cream settles into your skin like an old friend. This is Roland's Calidor, or what passes for it now. You've refilled the jar twice, once with a homemade version you concocted from glycerin and milk, and once with something purchased cheaply from a travelling apothecary who swore it was Parisian in nature. You didn't believe him, but bought it anyway. The jar felt too empty otherwise, because really the jar is more than cream. It's hope, concentrated. Hope that your skin might stay soft through the coal dust, that your cheeks might retain some bloom despite the London fog, that you might look in the mirror and see the girl you were before you scrubbed laundry in cold water or stood in line at the butcher's. They say beauty fades, but what they don't say is how hard you work to hold on to the edges of it. How many Victorian women keep quiet collections like yours? Tiny vials, powders, oils, all hidden from judgment, all whispered promises in glass. You remember your mother had a blue bottle. Cold cream, she called it, though it smelled faintly of vinegar and rose. She never went to bed without smoothing it over her temples. You used to laugh, until you caught yourself doing the same thing, same motion years later. At the time, you thought it was vanity. Now you understand it was survival. The world doesn't pause to comfort you when your face breaks out in winter, or when the sun leaves freckles you didn't ask for. But that tiny jar, that's your moment of control. You can't stop time, but you can moisturize through it. Tonight you trace the lines around your mouth with your fingertip, noticing, not judging. Then you reach for the other little bottle. Just a dram of castor oil, meant for eyelashes. Someone once told you it made them grow longer. You're not sure it works, but the ritual is half the point. Your vanity table, modest as it is, holds all your quiet rebellions. A chalk stick for touch-ups, a scrap of beeswax for your lips, a spool of silk thread for threading your eyebrows. Not fashionable now, but your aunt taught you, and old habits linger. These aren't tools of seduction. They're talismans. Armour, even. Because no matter how many layers your dress has, the first thing the world sees is your face. You lean closer to the mirror now, the glass slightly warped, showing a version of you that isn't entirely honest. A little narrower here, a little more forgiving there. You prefer it this way. There's a small tin tucked behind the lamp, rouge, crushed and faded. You open it with a gentle sigh. The colour is nearly gone, used up in the corners where your fingertip always goes. You dab a bit onto your cheeks, just enough to lift the pallor. It's not for others. You're not expecting company. It's for you. A reminder that you still care what you look like when no one's watching. In Victorian times, painted women were considered vulgar. But that was only if the paint showed. The real art was in secrecy. You were meant to look fresh, but not tinted. Glowing, but not powdered. Any evidence of effort was scandalous. So you learned to be clever. You mixed starch with rose water, rubbed raw potato juice on sunspots, pressed chamomile-soaked cloths over your eyes, read magazine clippings that promised French secrets, and natural complexions that curiously all required white lead or arsenic. One even suggested swallowing tapeworms to keep a trim figure. You didn't fall for that one. But you do remember buying a skin tonic once that turned your fingertips slightly grey for a week. Still, none of that was as strange as the violet petal powder you once made. Crushed by hand, dried in the sun, then pressed into a locket you wore near your heart. Supposedly, it drew out impurities. You never noticed a difference, but it made you feel elegant. And that was enough. Because every woman in your street had her own rituals. Some swore by goose fat. Others used milk baths if they could afford it. A few rubbed onions on their scalps for hair growth. You tried that too. Once. The smell lingered for days, but no one talked openly about it. You all pretended beauty came naturally, like breathing or sewing straight hems. It was the quiet lie you agreed to tell together, that you just happened to wake up glowing, that you weren't trying, that you weren't afraid of becoming invisible. Now, as you place each jar and tin back in their places, you do so with reverence. You know this vanity table isn't glamorous. The drawer sticks. The mirror frame is chipped. The brush is missing half its bristles. But it's yours, and every night it receives you with dignity. Because this ritual isn't about pretending to be young. It's about remembering that you are still here. You smooth your hands over your face one last time, then blow out the lamp. And in the darkness, the smell of lemon, rose, and old secrets lingers, soft and real, like you. You press your fingers into the warm dough, shaping it gently, feeling it stretch under your palms. It's early still, too early for sunlight, but the kitchen is already alive. The cast iron stove hums with heat, A kettle murmurs faintly on the hob, and on the table before you, a row of baking tins waits like obedient soldiers. Bread first, then soap. That's the rule. Victorian women were no strangers to double-duty kitchens, and your day begins not with breakfast, but with boiling lye and scraping tallow into a battered pan. There's a ritual to it, just like with the cold cream or the fan. This one simply smells worse, and could burn your skin off if you're not careful. You reach for the soap mould, carved wood, handed down from your mother. She etched a flower into the side years ago just to make the final bars prettier. Even lye can be elegant, she used to say, and so you make soap from ashes, fat and thyme. It's not just about hygiene. It's a quiet rebellion against dirt, illness, and everything the outside world tries to smuggle into your home. Cleanliness is not just godliness, it's defence. But your soap isn't the only curious thing in this kitchen. There's the vinegar jug, thick and cloudy, used for everything from hair rinses to window polishing. There's the borax tin, bright red with flaking paint, used to bleach laundry, and sometimes even soak your feet when they ache. And then there's the laundry bluing, a little bottle of deep cobalt liquid that somehow makes white linens appear whiter. Magic by chemistry. You open the high cupboard and bring down a tin marked Fuller's Earth. Most people think it's for laundry. You know better. Mixed with rose water, it becomes a skin paste, cooling, calming, hiding redness. You apply it sometimes after soap making when the lye fumes get too bold and your cheeks sting. It sits beside another jar, ground chalk, not the blackboard kind, but the beauty kind. Mixed with lemon juice, it acts like bleach, harsh but effective. You dabbed some on a freckle once. It faded after 2 weeks. The freckle came back. So did you. There's a whole apothecary hidden in this kitchen if you know where to look. One shelf for cooking, one for medicine, one for secrets. That brown bottle with the cork, laudanum, meant for cramps, meant for headaches, meant for grief you can't name but feel blooming in your chest on stormy afternoons. You don't use it often, just knowing it's there helps. And tucked behind the flour jar, a tiny tin labelled Mrs. Allen's World's Hair Restorer, a grand name for something that smells like damp herbs and vinegar. You've used it for months. You're not sure it does anything, but your hair hasn't gone grey quite yet. Coincidence, maybe. Or maybe belief is its own kind of medicine. The kettle begins to whistle softly and you move to take it off the hob, fingers wrapped in the corner of your apron. You pour the steaming water into a basin, letting it mix with herbs you crushed earlier, lavender and thyme mostly with a pinch of mint. It's not for tea, it's for your feet. After hours of standing, of baking, scrubbing, sweeping and soap making, this bowl of fragrant water feels like forgiveness. You sit, skirts bundled around your knees, and slowly lower your aching soles into the basin. The heat bites at first, but then seeps upward, a hush spreading through your bones. This is the moment you look forward to most. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's yours. The kitchen is dim now, shadows stretching long over worn tile and cracked wooden beams. The fire dies low. The smell of lye has faded into something warm and faintly sweet. You lean back and exhale, staring at the ceiling where soot has curled into ghostly shapes. In this quiet, your eyes drift to the shelf above the stove. A single mug sits there, chipped and stained. Your personal cup, always slightly too hot to handle, always filled with something meant to soothe. You reach for it, as you always do. Tonight, it's bone broth and barley, slow simmered with a bay leaf and a pinch of salt. You sip carefully. The warmth travels down your throat and into your belly, anchoring you, and you remember something. That tiny bottle in the back of the drawer, the one marked Dr. Thomas's eclectic oil. A catch-all cure, the label claims. You used it last week on a burn. The week before that, on a cough. Before that, on your husband's shoulder when it ached from chopping wood, it didn't fix any of those things. But you felt better using it. And maybe that's enough. Because so many of these things, these curious tools of Victorian womanhood, aren't really about miracle cures or beauty transformations. They're about small acts of control, dignity in repetition, power in routine. You may not vote, you may not speak in parliament, but you can mix vinegar with lemon peel and make your own brass polish. You can boil herbs and pretend they're spells. You can soak your feet at the end of a day and call it medicine. And in a world where everything is expected of you, grace, cleanliness, devotion, beauty, these little objects let you reclaim something. Not for the world, not even for your family, but for you. The basin water has cooled. Your tea is gone. You rise, dry your feet, and set everything in its place. There is order here, even if no one else sees it, even if they call it strange. And now the house is still. The fire has gone out. The basin is empty. The tin of rouge is closed, and the door to the kitchen has been latched with its familiar soft click. You lie back in the hush of your room, your body wrapped in warmth, your mind full of the small, strange things that shaped your day. Not grand inventions or royal decrees, just jars, brushes, soaps, fans and powders. Just quiet tools for survival, for grace, for self-respect. Each object told a story, and every story was yours. You remember the way the starch crackled in your petticoat, the way cold cream melted beneath your fingers, the way a whalebone brush tugged just a little too hard at your scalp, the scent of violet petals, the sting of vinegar, the hush of linen drying near the hearth. These are the memories that don't need words, because they live in your senses, in your skin. You did so much today, and yet most of it will go unnoticed. That's all right. The magic was never in being seen. It was in doing. So rest now. Let the echoes of the day settle into silence, the kind of silence that feels earned. Outside, a breeze rattles the shutters. The night holds its breath. And you, steady, resourceful and quietly powerful, drift into sleep, wrapped not in lace, but in the fabric of 1,000 ordinary triumphs.